So great. We're live. Welcome to Boss Mama community. And ladies, I want to introduce you to a special guest, Mike Gorday. It's a human solution consultant. Been doing it for many, many years. But Mike, can you tell me more about what that actually means? And how are
Well,
you today?
I'm fine. How are you?
Oh, good. Oh, good.
Good. What human solutions consultant means?
Yeah.
Well, that's sort of a developed, I guess you could say, a developed piece over time. I used to do life coaching, but because I have so many years in the psychology field, and I combine that also with all the years that I have in like martial arts, I use martial arts terms. I use different aspects of things, but primarily because of all the psychology education that I have, and I've worked in the field for so long, I found that coaching just wasn't quite the proper term. So, because a lot of times when I'm talking to somebody, as you know, I will point out something and you're not even aware of it.
Absolutely.
And then that puts you on a whole different track, and that's something a little different than what a coach does. A coach, or really primarily a coach, asks questions and relies on the person to get the answer.
Yeah.
And where I demark from that point is that sometimes I look and see something that's going on and bring your attention to it, which creates a whole different path that you get to take, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. We've been working together for a couple of months now, and it was such a life-changing experience. So I definitely want to thank you for coming over to the group and sharing wisdom with us. And what a great timing, because exactly in a couple of days, we will start our first challenge within the group, that how to take away that fear, that guilt, that kind of heaviness of disattaching yourself from your kids and really stepping into those reaching your goals, get your possibilities, see what is available for you as a mother, as a woman out there, uh, uh, like create that healthy balance. So what can you kind of share your light or your wisdom on that topic, and see how we can help the mothers out there that feel that way, that feel a little stuck behind and feel guilty of chasing their dreams without setting away from their kids.
That's yes. There's a lot of stuff wrapped around that uh, creates an issue. Part of that is cultural, right? Part of that is that you're supposed to take care of your kids, and part of that is, so there's some shaming involved in that that's very subtle. And what we have to remember is we have to take care of ourselves first. You know, the best analogy for that is if you're flying in an airplane. How have you flown before?
Yeah.
What is the standard safety thing, the standard safety presentation that they do before we take off?
Put the mask on you first so you
Put
can take care of the rest.
Right, put the mask on you first. There is this sort of shaming involved about taking care of yourself first, uh, that really is not effective as a strategy. So it can be a little difficult when we are focusing attention on ourselves before we focus attention on everybody else. But you have to make that mind shift from you are taking care of yourself so that you can take care of others. And I use the concept, it's called selflessness through self, right? So it means that in order for us to be able to give to others, we have to be able to give that to ourselves. Does that make sense?
That's beautiful. That is so powerful and exactly true, because if you don't fill up your own cup, you have nothing else to give.
Right. And there's a tendency to feel unworthy of our own selves, and we're constantly giving away ourselves, and people are walking all over us, people are disrespecting us, and it actually translates into our children. So that's one of the
That's
negative
beautiful.
aspects of this type of thing. And if you're not taking care of yourself and giving to your children through this mechanism, you're setting them up to disrespect you. And that's a hard thing to think in a moment, isn't it?
Absolutely. And not only that, what I notice is within me a couple of years back when I was doing just that, focusing on them, they can't really see my example of thriving. They don't see and they cannot follow my example of how to really accomplish themselves and how to chase their own dreams. They think that this is what it has to look like, the family dynamic, and not really be able to really that live in their imagination and go beyond that.
Right. So is it okay if we talk about a little bit one of the things that we talked about as far as you and
Yes,
your children are concerned? I remember
yes, yes.
one of the uh issues that we had when you first did it was your children were not going to bed on time, and they were always
Absolutely, especially
interrupting,
pandemic time.
right?
Yes,
And one of the things that you told me is that you feel guilty leaving them alone, right?
absolutely,
So you would
absolutely.
you would go in there and you would put them to bed, and then you would lay in the bed with them until they fell asleep,
Hmm.
right? And we talked about how you're training them to do that, right?
So for me, just a little heads up on the story. When they announced the lockdown and my kids became at home, I lost this entire sense of order. So
Mhm.
I felt guilty that I have to work and they're all day at home and I cannot really give them what they need from me, that mother love, that attention that they crave so much, that I allow them to be awake later, to put them to bed at 10 and 11 o'clock because I couldn't just make them fall asleep. They weren't tired.
Right.
And yes, I felt so lost and guilty and ashamed really to, it's like what's going on and how I can. So yeah, please share your wisdom with the world, because since that point on, my children are going to bed at 8 p.m. sharp. There is no negotiation, and I just love it, love it.
Right. And that's one of the reasons why that's so easy is that children really do well in structured environments. If the environment they're in, our behavior or what we do is highly influenced by the environment that we're in. Okay? That's the number one predictor of behavior is the environment, or the number one factor, right?
Mhm.
Children need a well-structured environment to thrive. And the reason why they need that is it gives them a feeling of safety and security, right? So
Mhm.
so you were feeling guilty and spending all this extra time, and you were creating the situation where you started to feel bad because you couldn't get your children to go to sleep, and then you started to feel guilty for that, and so you were wrapping yourself around the spindle about this whole thing. And then we talked a little bit about this structured environment and how children really thrive in these things. And then the second piece was what was the second piece? Do you remember?
For me, yes. So for me, I think the guilt was not only that I cannot put them to sleep, but also because I am a single mom. The fact that I have two boys at home,
Uh-huh.
which is two males, and I don't have the male example in the house. So I felt bad that it was like, okay, how do you leave? You know, how, especially to all my single moms out there that gonna listen to you, this is so crucial and so important, this little nugget on how do you how do you overcome that? How do you overcome that guilt that yes, you broke a family dynamic and you don't have the male example in the house when you're raising two little males?
Yeah, that's a definitely a tough question to answer. But at that age, we're really talking more about what environmental factors are you really going to give them. We're not you don't have to be mom and dad. You can try to be mom and dad, but what you need to do is be a person that they can rely on, correct?
Yes. Create the safety and create the peace
Right.
in your own home.
Right. So what did we do? We set up a plan for you to do what? What was the plan?
So the plan was every single day we give them 30 minutes as time. We create a ritual of going to bed where we brush our teeth, we wash our faces, we read a book, we play. They really feel my presence with them in those 30 minutes. And the moment that this 30 minutes is done, and water, toilets, everything in those 30 minutes, the door is getting closed and they're going to sleep.
Okay. So at the beginning of this thing, you were like, no, they're never going to go to sleep. This never going to happen. But what happened? It took less than 2 weeks. What happened?
It took 2 days.
Oh,
It was mind blowing. It took 2 days. It was the first day, I think, was the longest where they fought each other, and it took like maybe 40 minutes. But then the second day around, it took less than 10 minutes for them to fall asleep.
okay.
Now, what blew my mind after that structure, that my biggest son that had night terrors and was scared and couldn't sleep until 11, he came to me, he's like, Mom, I feel so good now because I feel good. I'm going to sleep. Like he actually taught himself how good it is to be a grown up kid and go to sleep on himself. So it was amazing to watch that.
Yeah. Now you don't have that problem anymore, do you?
No, no, not anymore. And doesn't matter, daycare or not, 8 o'clock sharp, they're in bed.
Right. And they fall asleep. That's and see what happens. What happens is you're training those behaviors. And I know that's a hard thing to hear is that you those behaviors with your children that you don't like they didn't want to go to sleep, that you felt trapped in this symptom or system where you had to go and you had to lay down until they fell asleep, right?
Hmm.
And the hard thing to understand is that you trained them to be that way because of your guilt, because of your feeling guilty, right?
Yep.
So the first thing was identifying this piece and then identifying the behaviors. Now, what happens when you go to change a behavior of your child? Well, because they have you trained, and this is true, we have the child will train you to get what it wants. It may not
Yes.
be what it needs, but it will try to train you to get what it wants. That's what crying is about. Uh, as a parent, that you know that there are different cries for different things. You know, they cry differently when they're hungry than when they're in pain or when they need the diaper changed, right?
Yep.
So they're already training you to meet their needs. And what we get caught into as parents, and this can be a dad role as well, is we get caught up in that idea because we think, okay, we have to do this. This is what we signed up for, so we have to respond every time in
Hmm.
a predetermined way, which is how we become a good parent, right? So we kind of do things that really the child wants, but the child doesn't need. So the so what happens when we want to change that behavior is that at first you want to set boundaries, right? So what were the boundaries that you had to set?
8 o'clock curfew. We're turning off the light. We're going to sleep.
Right? And you
You
talk to
get
them,
your mom time. You get your mom time before that, 30 minutes, and then the next morning.
right? So that was a very simple thing to do. I'm going to set up 8 o'clock is your bedtime, and you walked them through that. You sat down with them and said, "This is what's going to happen at 8 o'clock.
Yeah.
You are going to bed, and I'm going to leave the room. I'm not going to lay down with you anymore. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to just leave the room." And that's the way you did it. You just cut it right off, right? You didn't do. We talked
Yeah.
about a step down process where you would sit in the room and then you would uh, I can't
So,
remember all the steps,
so
but
with me was yeah, it was a couple of months ago. What I did was I sat outside of the room with the door open. So I
yeah,
sat on the couch with the door open and let them fall asleep. And they know that I'm here. I can hear them, but I'm not gonna walk in, and they need to go to sleep.
right, okay, yeah, that's right, I remember that. And part of the reason for that was so that they knew that you were there, because that's
Yeah.
one of the fears that drives these responses, is that suddenly you're there and then you're not there, and so they feel like you're abandoning them. And
Yeah.
so you kept the door open so that they could know that you were still there. You just weren't right in their beds and cuddling with
Hmm.
them.
Yeah.
So what happened is that you set them down, you tell them all this, and then you followed that plan. You held that boundary. And what was the one thing that you were the most afraid of that I told you would be the very first thing that you encountered?
It's not gonna happen. It's not gonna happen. It's gonna be a torture. It's gonna take hours. It's not my kids. They're just not gonna do it. They're just gonna run out, wake up each other.
Right? That was your fear, right?
Yeah.
And I told you what's going to happen is they're going to fight you, right? They're going to initially
Yeah.
fight you. So what usually happens when we go to change behaviors for our children or our pets or anything really, if you manage people it's the same way, is that it you will get resistance, and that resistance means that whatever they do to get your attention to do what you're doing, the compliance behaviors that they are showing for you to comply with their wishes, is that they ramp up. So there's a lot of resistance at first, because it's basically like if I have been giving you a cookie after dinner every night
Mhm.
because I want to reward you for eating dinner, and I suddenly take that cookie away, there's a freak out, right?
Yeah.
But let's say that over time it's been this, and here's a very parental thing, is that you enter into negotiations with your children that revolve around a lot of them arguing about why you should do something for them.
Yeah.
And you want to give them this respect, and you want to give them this idea that, okay, this is something we can do, and it turns into this power struggle about how, and then you end up giving them the cookie or whatever it is. So what you've set up is a dynamic where the kid knows, okay, this is what I have to do to work to get this cookie or this
Hmm.
treat or this thing.
Yeah.
And as long as that happens, everything's fine. But the minute you deviate from that, it creates more issues, because there's emotional deregulation, and we ramp up the behaviors in order to get your attention, right? So that's what that's
Yeah.
what happened first. The first night was you had a lot of struggles because they were not letting you go,
No.
right?
Absolutely.
But what was it that I told you had to do no matter what?
Stand my ground. I made a decision. Stand my ground. I follow what we decided.
Right. and that's the piece that they're ultimately looking for, is you to stand your ground. And this is not limited to just parenting. This goes across the board for people, is being able to stand your ground. And that's one of the problems that we have with feeling guilty and unworthy, or being a people pleaser, is that you don't stand your ground. And when you don't
Yeah.
stand your ground, people really know that. And that's what creates, unfortunately, that's what creates this being taken advantage of thing that often you feel like is happening with other people, that they disrespect you, that they kind of don't, they walk all over you kind of thing. And I mentioned this earlier, is that if you're like this, is that you're going to teach your kids to do this too.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the important thing is that you set the boundary, right? So whatever it is that you're trying to do with your child, maybe it's getting to bed on time, maybe it's this, but you have to set that boundary. And then you have to hold that boundary. And you have to hold that boundary no matter what happens.
Absolutely.
So for you, the boundary was, you're going to bed at 8 o'clock and I'm leaving the room. Right? So at 8 o'clock, you put them in there and you left the room. Did you go
Yep.
back in the room?
No,
No.
no, never since that day that I went back to the room. Uh, Honestly, it works like a charm. But I think what was the most amazing for me as an experience overall, it's seeing how much more effects when I stood my ground, when I took that power to myself and gave myself that extra time. Because the whole reason why we even started with that was, how do I break free? How do I get that extra breathing time for me? Because I was suffocating.
Right.
They're
Right.
at home, they're in lockdown, they're with me day and night. I work from home, I study, I do so many things, and I'm just don't have the time for me, right?
Mm-hmm.
So working through that, getting that boundary is was so crucial to get me this extra 2 hours of really me alone time to breathe, and it was amazing ever since.
Yeah. Yeah. And do you feel guilty about it now?
No,
No.
no, not at all.
Okay.
That's
And
exactly what we're going to be talking in the challenge as well. That for me, like, my experience and how I felt through that place as a mother, that you have that guilt, but that guilt is really there, like, almost like a drug addiction. Like, ever since we give birth, we just feel addicted to our kids and caring for them. And I love my kids to pieces. I'll do anything for them. But there is a healthy care and there is
mhm.
obsessive care.
Yeah, one is called enmeshment. You're describing enmeshment. And what happens is, it's particularly with that process that you just described, is that your identity is created through the child, right? So when your identity is created through somebody else, who are you?
You're
You don't,
lost in.
because if those people aren't there, you're nobody, right? Because that's your identity. Your identity is mother. And so you become enmeshed with taking care of your children,
Mhm.
and you give that piece of you away.
Yeah.
And that again is it doesn't serve anybody well at all.
Hmm.
So I mean,
I
even if you think in terms of, I don't know, Christianity, you have this Christ figure that's giving, giving, giving all the time,
Yeah.
right? But if you ever read the Bible, he goes off on his own and takes care of himself quite a bit. So
But we don't see that part of the story. We just see that the part that people want you to see, and want you to think that this is the norm and this is normal.
right, right. So taking care of yourself is should always be the first priority. And we all kind of learn that through different manners and stuff, but it's a different piece to learn it, to understand it, and to realize it, you know.
And
I
apply
because i
it.
can i can sit here all day and say you need to take care of yourself, and you can go, yeah, I know, right? But
Yeah.
you just keep going back into doing what you're doing, and people disrespect you, or whatever.
Mhm.
And then there's the understanding, there's the piece that goes, I really need to do this, but I can't. I don't know how.
Yeah. So exactly, getting to that mindset, covering up that place of getting to realize that it's time to change, like it's 80% of the battle. Like, when you get to that point, you just need the little tactics, little things, little steps, and you're gonna get it done. So absolutely, Mike. Like, I feel like we covered so much in this little time. We touched on so many things, that which is amazing. Now, just because we're a little short on time today, I want to know how people can get in touch with you. Tell us a little bit more about what you do, your work, and how we can find you.
You can find me pretty easily. It's Mike Gourdet at MikeGourdet.com. That's my main website. You can
Mhm.
also get a hold of me through Facebook, which is J Michael Gourdet, I think. Is that
I
right?
will attach all the links below the video. So, ladies, if you want to get in touch, definitely check Mike work up. And I know that you've been working you have a podcast as well.
Yeah, I have several different projects. One is a podcast called What Drives You, and that's where I talk a little bit about human behavior and how it how it layers upon each other, basically. So I cover different topics about what beliefs are, what values are, what reality is. I think the last one I did was time, how we perceive time, things like that. So it's not really oriented. It's oriented more on education about how human behavior evolves.
Mhm.
Uh, so I do that. I also have consulting business, or coaching and consulting, if you put it in that direction, where I have clients, and we set goals, and we move them through those issues until they can get what they want.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yep. I know that best. Absolutely. And thank you, Mike. So, like I said, I will post all the links below the video. We covered so much. I'm just going to recap real quick how to set up those boundaries with your kids, how to make sure that you get time for yourself as well, and really step up those standards for yourself through your children. Is such a wide topic, and I'm grateful for you coming today and sharing your kind of nuggets of knowledge, and make sure that we can start applying it all before the challenge starts.
Yeah, absolutely, anytime.
Thank you, and have a good night, and we will see you next time.
All right, bye bye.